Did you know that Ukraine is preparing for war in Crimea and that Kyiv is sending coronavirus-infected soldiers to Germany for training? Or that people don't believe Russia shot down Malaysian Airlines Flight MH17? Welcome to StopFake, the place where we break down disinformation about Ukraine and a little more. So let's get to it. Russian media are calling this year's International Sea Breeze 2020 military exercises sabotage and are accusing Ukraine and NATO countries of violating Russia. Politnavigator declared, quote, Kyiv is hatching the idea of waging a sabotage war against the Russian Federation and seeks to flood Crimea with partisans and spies, while RT in Russian and the Federalnoye Agentstvo Novosti, or RIA, quickly followed suit in spreading this latest fake. Now, this year's Sea Breeze exercises began on July the 20th and lasted only 1 week. Because of the coronavirus pandemic, the ground exercises were cancelled, leaving only ships and aircraft to carry out an amended and shortened program. The purpose of these exercises, which began in 1997, is to increase the interaction and cooperation of Ukraine's naval forces with the United States Navy and the navies of NATO partners. The Sea Breeze exercises are not intended to be a military provocation against Russia or an offensive against the Crimean Peninsula. Their aim is to bring Ukraine's fleet closer to NATO standards and to strengthen cooperation and stability in the Black Sea. Preparation for these large-scale exercises always begins well in advance and takes many months. Neighboring countries are notified in advance about some sea and air routes being blocked for maneuvers. On the eve of this year's Sea Breeze launch, the Kremlin deliberately blocked the area where, according to the 2020 plan, training exercises were supposed to take place. During the exercises, a Russian patrol ship radioed the Bulgarian ship Bodry, demanding the ship leave the area. A similar situation occurred during the 2019 Sea Breeze exercises. In the past, much of the exercises took place around the Crimean Peninsula, and this has always outraged the Kremlin. In 2006, for example, during the presidency of pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko, the Sea Breeze exercises were disrupted. Back then, pro-Russian forces in Crimea staged protests and tried to hoist Russian flags in Feodosia, responding to what they called NATO aggression. At that time, Russian Duma member Konstantin Zatulin demanded that Crimea be handed over to Russia. NATO aggression is a Kremlin narrative that has taken root since the end of the 1990s, when the Sea Breeze exercises with NATO countries were first launched in the Black Sea in accordance with a memorandum on military cooperation between the United States and Ukraine. Donbass Today, the official publication of the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, and the Russian internet company Yandex, featured stories this week claiming a group of Ukrainian soldiers were sent to participate in international exercises in Germany without being tested for COVID-19 prior to their departure. Valentin Shevchenko, the press officer of Ukraine's airborne forces, told StopFake that soldiers from the 80th Brigade, currently in Germany for military exercises, passed all required medical examinations, and they all tested negative for the coronavirus. Shevchenko said, quote, our soldiers were tested several times for the coronavirus, both in Ukraine and in Germany. Donbass Today also claims that the commander of another brigade is not accepting negative coronavirus test results from soldiers who are returning from furloughs and holidays and is forcing them to undergo additional testing, for which they are forced to pay some $40 per test. StopFake reached out to the brigade in question regarding these allegations. We were told that all soldiers who are returning from holiday, business trips, or military exercises abroad are kept under strict medical supervision for 14 days. If there is suspicion of coronavirus, the soldiers are tested at available municipal medical facilities, and the soldiers are not charged for the tests. On the 6th anniversary of the 2014 crash of Malaysian Airlines Flight MH17 over Russian-occupied eastern Ukraine, Russian news site Newsfront published an article completely distorting and misrepresenting the results of a Washington Post poll about the reasons for the plane crash. According to Newsfront, the residents of southeastern Ukraine and annexed Crimea do not believe that Russia is responsible for downing the plane. However, the Washington Post article entitled Flight MH17 Crashed 6 Years Ago, Ukrainians Have Very Different Views on Who is to Blame, tells a rather different story. The article is based on a poll conducted by two polling companies, Ukraine's Kyiv International Institute of Sociology and Russia's Levada Center. The survey was first conducted in December of 2014 in southeastern Ukraine and Crimea, and again in 2019, but this time throughout all of Ukraine, including the occupied territories. People were asked, have you heard about the catastrophe of the Malaysian aircraft in July 2014 in eastern Ukraine? And if so, in your view, what caused it? Newsfront only talks about those survey results which nicely fit its propaganda. That is, Newsfront mentions that the survey included Crimea and southeastern Ukraine, but fails to mention that residents of occupied Donetsk and Luhansk also participated in the survey. Newsfront claims that, quote, in 2014, only in Ukraine's western and central regions where anti-Russian propaganda is actively operating do people believe that the responsibility for the MH17 crash lies with Russia. In fact, the survey results indicate that in 2019, more than 50% of those surveyed in the western and central regions believe Russia is guilty for the downing of Flight MH17. At the same time, the majority of those interviewed in the southwestern regions of Ukraine also place the responsibility on the Russian military. The results of the poll in Donetsk and Luhansk in 2019 showed that the majority of respondents who agreed to answer believe that Donbas militants are responsible for the downing of the civilian jetliner. Newsfront further claims that 40% of those surveyed in southeastern Ukraine said they doubted that Russia was responsible for the crash. But in fact, the survey results show that nearly 40% of those respondents in southeast Ukraine said it was hard to say who was to blame. This does not mean that respondents don't believe in Russia's involvement in the crash. Rather, those who live closest to the actual site where Flight MH17 did crash did not want to answer the question, explains the Washington Post. Newsfront also conveniently ignores other 2019 survey results that about a quarter of Crimean residents surveyed said that they had never heard anything about the downing of Flight MH17, whereas in 2014, at the beginning of Russia's occupation of the peninsula, that figure constituted only a couple of percentage points. Since Russia's occupation of Crimea, human rights organizations have repeatedly noticed systemic human rights violations in the annexed peninsula, in particular, freedom of speech. A Dutch-led investigative team has concluded that a Russian Buk surface-to-air missile destroyed the civilian airliner for which the Russian government bears responsibility. Based on evidence gathered over the course of several years since the downing of Flight MH17, a trial is currently unfolding in Amsterdam against 3 Russian citizens and 1 Ukrainian. This piece by Newsfront is an example of the repetitive nature of Russian disinformation, in this case, repeating the well-worn Russian trope that Flight MH17 was shot down by a Ukrainian missile. StopFake has debunked this alternative version of events many times, and you can find out more on our website, stopfake.org. That's it for this week. Be vigilant, stay safe, and be on the lookout for fakes. Remember, washing your hands and social distancing will protect you from the coronavirus, and critical thinking will protect you from Russian disinformation. If you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, forward it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Marko Suprun, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.